You're still searching for that breakthrough that always feels just out of reach. What is your true life path, and how do you finally find it? Welcome to Say It Anyway, the podcast where we help you unlock the breakthrough you've been waiting for so your true life path can finally come to life. Each week, we share powerful practical tools you can use right now to start transforming your life. You'll hear raw, honest conversations with people from all walks of life, people who found their way forward and are here to share mindsets, strategies, and wisdom that help them get there. I'm James Ferrigno. I've helped people reconnect with their power for years. I'll guide you beyond surface level solutions into a deeper way of seeing the world, one rooted in connection, courage, and open hearted dedication. This is your space to think differently, live boldly, and finally do the thing you were meant to do. Let's get started. Welcome to Say It Anyway, and I'm James Ferrigno, the host of Say It Anyway, and our guest today is Sarah Devine. She's a White Tiger Qigong instructor. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me along. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here. Um, why don't we start with where did you grow up, and what were some of your first childhood memories?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Do you know, my very first childhood memory is actually stuffing my head under my mum's jumper. I can even remember it's this beautiful lemon yellow color. and
Mm-hmm.
and I don't remember the context, but I remember we were in the living room and I was very shy. um, but I grew up in Kent, in England, which is known as the Garden of England, and rightly so because it's full of beautiful orchards. So there's a lot of fruits that's grown there, and we actually live right next to the orchards. My mum would make money picking fruit, and then when I was older, that's what I did for my first job. I think I was 10 when I first started picking up the windfall apples for the
Oh.
neighbour. For she gave me like 10 pence an hour or something. It was so that was really lovely. And I also remember when we moved, I was only 2. I've got this vague memory of my dad lifting me up to look in a very high cupboard to see if it was empty. So
Ah,
I love those early memories. Just little snippets, little snapshots.
yeah, just little, we get to keep little pieces.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Kent? Have you ever been to England?
I have not, unfortunately.
Mm.
Someday.
Yeah, so it's got a lot of rolling hills. It's very green and lush. Quite different to where I live now in Australia. When it's
Yeah.
summer here, it's very, very dry, but it has its own charm. There's a certain beauty to that I've come to really appreciate.
Yeah, they're different. I had a similar thing. I grew up in upstate New York where it was very wet and hot in the summer, cold in the winter. And but then California, moving to the desert, the desert really has its own different thing from.
Mm, yeah, it's quite enticing though, isn't it? I find that
Yeah.
there's a real power behind that dryness. It puts you in your place. It really it reminds me daily that I'm just a guest. I'm just here for, you know, short haul, and it's just gonna keep on. And I like that. Actually, I know that for some people that might seem uncomfortable, but it actually gives me a sense of peace. It really reflects the kind of work that I do actually anyway in Qigong, to be able to come to that kind of alignment and peace with nature and the natural
Hmm.
cycles. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially mortality can cause a lot of fear when there's a disconnection there,
Mm.
and when you don't understand or when you're not connected to the mortality and death aspect and to the natural world, it really can be a fearful thing. But I think with those connections, I've noticed with my own journey that it can be somewhat comforting instead of frightening.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, nobody wants to suffer. We don't want to be in pain when we have to leave. But if you can have that sense of being part of a wholeness that's greater than yourself. And that's part of every ultimately every tradition, isn't it? That philosophical religious traditions, many of them try to embrace that, but none more so for me, at least, than Taoism. And that's the Qigong that I practice is Taoist Qigong. And the most significant aspect of the practice, I think, is really to understand, or at least, I mean, perhaps we can't understand them entirely, but we can perceive, sense, and draw on the patterns and cycles and seasons of nature to understand our own internal rhythms, and also to understand when we're out of balance, so we can bring ourselves back into balance. And of course, the whole cycle of life is like the seasons. I mean, we have the winter, spring, summer, fall, or actually it's spring, summer, fall, winter, isn't it, of our own cycle and of life. And this is again a thing that we explore in the practice of Qigong.
I like that. Maybe you can real quick give us just your basic understanding of Taoism for people that might not be familiar with it.
Well, I apply that in the context of the practice of Qigong, because I think there are Taoism is a philosophy. It's a philosophy that like any philosophy, like Buddhism as well, and there are many crossovers there. It gives you a platform for understanding your place in the world, and helping you to live a life that's meaningful, and also to grow for personal development. In the way that I've learned about Taoism is through its connection with Qigong. So maybe I need to tell you what Qigong is first. Qigong is an ancient Chinese practice of meditative movement. There are internal alchemy practices like meditations and breathwork, as well as external alchemy practices, which are movement practices, where you embody the internal work is still going on as you move. So you're very driven by the finding a stillness inside. So there's stillness in movement. There's movement within stillness in Qigong. So there's different types of Qigong. There's martial Qigong. There's Confucius Qigong. There's Buddhist Qigong. There's Taoist Qigong. And the Taoist Qigong tradition that I've learned is medical Qigong. So it's medical in the sense that it provides a self-care approach. So it's a way that you learn to navigate and set your own compass for your personal healing and transformation. And Taoism is this philosophy that's, it's got a rich history, and I can't really claim to know all of it, but I do know that as far back as over 2,000 years ago, Lao Tzu is considered to be, one of the forefathers of the Taoist tradition. And he was a philosopher, practitioner, who wrote a book called the Tao Te Ching. The story goes that his friends or his disciples, his students, he was going off on a journey, and they begged him to, before he left, to leave them something concrete to work from. And to this day, scholars and Taoists still debate the deeper meanings of these texts. So, which I think is rather delightful. I've even tried it myself with a lady who taught me the Chinese characters. She unpacked the images with me and a friend, and then we got to kind of make our own interpretation of those images, which was rather lovely. So Taoists are people who look for the middle path. They want to the balance is retained by kindness, by benevolence, by keeping your own internal compass very open and aware, so that you're able to be kind, and which, you know, is a very basic philosophy for many traditions, but it's beautiful. And also there are religious Taoists as well, that I'm not so familiar with religious Taoism. But we look to nature, so that's where you return to the center by returning to the source. So, and we will return to the source one day in your contemplations and in your practice. If you can continue to return to the source, that's where you can provide meaning to your world, and also groundedness and comfort. I know I went round a nice little
Yeah, that's nice.
path there, but hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah. I think it gave us some understanding of it. Pulled a few things together for me as well. It reminded me of things I'd
Mm,
learned years ago and maybe don't think about every day. So yeah, thank you for that. It's
you're welcome.
very nice. Why don't we return to your source? And so after picking apples, what was your next career step?
I formed a band at school. I was
Mm-hmm.
always really into music. My parents were in the local amateur dramatic society, so I used to join them from the age of 8. I was very excited when I got to
Ah,
be in the chorus, and eventually when I
mm,
was 16 I played the princess. So, oh my god, that was,
oh,
starring moment. I remember in the audience one day, this is just a village pantomime, but there was this guy called Kid
mm,
Jensen who was a DJ on
mm-hmm,
BBC Radio, and I was
mm-hmm,
just absolutely over the moon that he was there. So music was sort of front and center for me. And then I studied drama and English at uni.
mm-hmm.
I left When I left uni, I ended up joining a radical theatre company. It was very left wing, and
Oh,
it was actually predominantly lesbian and gay theatre company, and I was sort of just a confused individual that they took under their wing.
mm-hmm.
I met some incredible people there,
Oh,
really, really real characters, very strong-willed, very um, exceptionally talented. And we performed several musicals together. Before I joined them, they did AIDS the musical, and
oh,
then which was quite confronting, and as you can imagine.
uh,
And then we did a musical called Desert Storm, a musical folly. So we were looking at the
oh,
first invasion of Iraq. And then we did Mother Russia as a lesbian, which was really not at all what the show was about. It was just a show grabbing name, but it was about 100 years of Russian history. So I actually didn't know much about politics or history before I joined them, and they really helped me to learn quite a lot through that process. So I absolutely loved that time. And I'd also studied in America. Actually, I've been in Virginia at Radford University. I did a
oh,
semester of performing arts when I was 20, um, which was, where I actually started a love affair with the US. I've been many
yeah.
times. Yeah. So,
Mm.
and then I joined a band. So,
Oh, okay.
after the theatre company.
So you were
Mm,
doing a little bit radical theater, but it was also
mm.
musical theater as well.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a musical theater background that led to a band.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And I had my first band was called THC. We thought that was
Oh,
really funny, but it was
yeah.
it. We said it was these happy colors was what it stood for. Um,
Oh,
and we performed a little bit in London, and then I joined MAP, and Chris Anderson was the absolute brain behind that band, and
oh,
he's still a musician to this day. He lives in Brighton, and he is in a
oh.
band called Crayola Lectern. He's amazing. He's a bass player, but he plays other instruments. So I worked with him
Oh, okay.
and a couple of other guys, and we created this extraordinary sound. It was called under the genre of prunk,
Yeah.
which is progressive punk, and
Progressive punk.
yeah, perfectly suited my sensibilities. Although people said I look like the girl next door, and then I start singing and I'd be like this crazy banshee. So um I liked having a bit of a split personality through that
Ah.
medium. You know, I was able to express a lot of my um darker um thoughts and confusions about the world, and it was an intense time, but it was very well received. We did pretty well in our time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you get to express some of your anger
Yes.
and stronger emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, they weren't necessarily about me, they were about the world, about my frustrations with the madness of the world. Well, actually, one time I did fall in love with someone I shouldn't have fallen in love with. Thinking of the Buzzcocks had already done that song, so but
Yeah.
I did write um I penned a ditty that expressed that frustration. So that was
Good.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I mean, that's kind of the at its heart, punk is political, right?
Mm. Well,
Ex-
interestingly enough, I used to live so in that theatre company. The two of the musicians were Vice Versa and Richard Famous from the Poison Girls. I don't know if you've heard of the Poison Girls, but I ended up living in their house in London before I moved to Germany. And sadly, Vi died some years ago, but they were extraordinary people. They were um, anarcho punks, and she didn't even start singing until she was in her 40s. So I drew a lot of inspiration from them.
yeah. Yeah. I've heard of her. I didn't really
Mm,
know a lot about her, but
yeah.
um, wow. So that's pretty fascinating. Where did that lead you to? How long did it take before you had interest in self-care or personal practice?
I suppose it was there in the background. I mean, even when I was in that world, I wasn't really a drinker. I wasn't a smoker.
Mm.
I took inspiration from Henry Rollins, who
Oh.
he was serious about his health, and um
Mm-hmm.
I'd do some push-ups before the gig, and I maybe, if anything, I had half a lager at the end of a gig, but I really wasn't into to taking masses of drugs or anything. I was just um I really wanted to perform from a place of consciousness, and so it was there. That seed was there. um I don't know when it first dropped exactly, but the drummer in the band, he started going to Zen Buddhist meditations in Camden Town in London, and he invited me along, and so I went, and that was fascinating because you actually meditate with the eyes open, and then there's walking meditation as well, and there's also chant that you do, and that was my first exposure to really any kind of extended self-development practice, and I loved it, and we went down we took a train ride to Brighton to pick up some mats that somebody had handmade, these meditation cushion and a mat. I've still got them.
Yeah.
um yeah, and I went on from there. I kept up the practice really, and even when I moved to Germany, which was in my early 30s, late 20s. I lived in Germany for 5 years. I was teaching English. So I still wasn't in that world of Qigong, but I was in the
Mm-hmm.
fitness world. Was with a partner who received an early inheritance, and we opened a fitness studio, and I worked in the fitness studio for a while. And where really that was kind of the time of my life after that relationship ended, where I had kind of like my teenage rebellion in my early 30s, I'd say. I actually I
Okay.
had this, I mean, I wasn't completely crazy, but I did go out a lot. I drank a bit, I smoked a bit. I just, I, I had slightly different life than I'd ever had before. And I realized I didn't like it, and I realized I had to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to come to Australia and visit a friend here. I felt that it was a very strong calling, and I needed to do it. And part of me knew it was going to save my life. And it was a very strong feeling. And I even had dreams where I was battling with the men in black. I was battling some kind of dark force
Wow.
to move forward into this next phase. And that was 23 years ago. And as soon as I arrived in Australia, my life changed. I met a partner who taught me Qigong. And even though that relationship was not ultimately successful, I stepped into a world of extremely deep self practice and discovery, and
Mm.
started to do Vipassana meditation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Mm-hmm.
that. There's 10-day silent retreats.
Ah.
Yeah, so that was like a birthing. That's an unfolding of so it's really they call it like it's going into a self operation, where if you sit still with yourself long enough, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and
Mm.
you you start to find a place from which you can really observe and accept and move forwards and learn and grow.
Yeah, reminds me of the sitting zazen, which I've done a couple times.
Yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, mm.
Hmm.
So you started out from this healthy place, kind of, you said the Henry Rollins kind of life path. You
Yeah,
then began to meditate, then veered from your path for what, a couple years or something,
yeah, it
and
was. Hmm.
then came back, and that's when you found Qigong.
That's right.
Um, so
Yeah,
you just had this couple year departure of
yeah.
partying
It
in your
was.
early 30s.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like a super dark path, but for me, I know
Mm-hmm.
it was. I knew it wasn't right, but it was
Mm-hmm.
somehow I had to experience it
Yeah.
to know the difference, perhaps. And there were certain times where I was offered things that could have ex expanded on that experience and taken me into a life that really wasn't my own and wasn't something I wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
luckily, I never did that. But I used to even dream about that, those kind of make your choice
Mm.
dreams. And
Choose your
um,
path.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So when that, I can't say it was one particular moment, but it did become quite clear that I had to change my circumstance in order to clarify the next step and how I would um, meet the deep desire. And James, I'd actually always had that, because when I was a kid, I remember picking up some really esoteric books. I got them at a rummage sale, and
Yeah.
I've still got some of them on my shelf. Excuse me. So yeah, I knew that there was something pretty unique and about um self-exploration and development. I even had dreams as a kid that I could bilocate, where I think, is it called bilocation? Or where you can be in two places at the same time.
Mm. Oh,
Um,
wow. That's
mm,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although
So,
my parents were, they were um, absolute sweethearts. So they were very ordinary in their daily life, but they had great comfort and support from their belief in the Christian faith, which I was raised in. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think that gave me some good platforms to expound upon in my later life. And they didn't ever go into on a journey of deep internal reflection or practices that would sort of lead them into greater self-development. But they always told me, look, that happens through life anyway, and they're right. Okay, so I can't say I'm better because I practice Qigong, but what I can say is that it is, on aggregate, it's a practice that will bring you into a place of where you are balanced, where you're more balanced, where you can work on your health and healing, and it takes you into a space of a transformative experience if it becomes a part of your life. Because for me, for instance, it's given me more mental clarity, greater capacity to be fully present in what I'm experiencing, and therefore living in the moment. And I came up with this yesterday. I was teaching someone in the park, and I just said Qigong is an act of self-love, and I thought, oh, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens when you love yourself is you can love others better. You can show up more fully for your relationships, and that's all we have, right? What more do we need, really, as humans having this, well, spiritual beings having a human experience?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's the thing.
Mm.
Love yourself more, get feedback and experience by learning to love others more, which you then in turn go back and learn to love yourself more. Then you learn to, kind of goes back and forth like that, right? And each one helps the other one deepen. And that, yeah, for me, that's a kind of a core purpose for life. You want to call it
Mm.
that? Um,
Yeah.
Experience, certainly. Yeah. So what was it that made you fully commit to the Taoist medical Qigong? To what drew you to that?
In 1992, I remember the year, I walked into an esoteric bookshop in London, and I bought this book
Mm-hmm.
by Mantak Chia, it was about Qigong practices for women, the internal alchemy practices.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really understand any of it. I remember thinking, this is important. Don't know what it is. Can't do anything with that right now. But I kept it. And years later, I met Jai, my partner. We've
Mm-hmm.
been together oh, over 16 years. And
Mm-hmm.
we one of the first things we talked about was Mantak Chia and this book, and he had this book, and I was like, oh, I've got that book
Mm.
too. That's kind of wild. And we were like, why don't we
Yeah.
read it together? And we actually started to read these this book and other qigong books about internal alchemy practices, and
Mm.
that was sort of like the trigger for me. I dabbled in it before. I was doing some qigong prior to that, but I really just thought, I have to learn, I have to learn more. And I
Mm-hmm.
got the opportunity to travel to Thailand to practice with Master Mantak Chia in the Dao Garden near Chiang Mai. And I did a 5-week intensive with him and learnt to become
Mm.
an instructor of his basic techniques. So that was what sort of kick-started it. And also my best friend had died, and she left me some money. So I thought, what can I do, to honor her and honor myself, and to help people who might have been in a similar circumstance to her. She had breast cancer, and I felt quite powerless to help her, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so I thought, and that was what really propelled me. And then the same year I did that teacher training, my mother died, and I was like, wow, you know,
Hmm.
that's, and she had cancer too.
Hmm.
And I thought, you know, we never know exactly what our innings are, but we can give it our best shot to do something that's powerfully preventative, and or at least can give you the skills you need to navigate through an illness, because not every illness is something you have control over. Sometimes it's environmental, or you know, something that you inherit. So,
Hmm.
but you can still work, you know, on a soul level to come into a state of greater peace and
Hmm.
understanding. So that drove me to, it committed me to my personal path, but also to teach others. And so it's you've probably heard this from other people who have a vocation. You're like, it's actually not me, it's driving it. It's something bigger. I can feel that. I can feel that
Yeah.
it just said, right, Sarah, this is it. You're there now. This is your path. You know, go on. Get on with it.
Ah. Uh, how did studying with the Master Mantak Chia, how did that shape your understanding of Qigong?
Well, at first, I remember sitting there and thinking, his accent wasn't easy to understand, so it took me a few
Uh-huh.
days to tune in, and then I was quite delighted by the way that he has a very unique turn of phrase and a way to express himself, and you know, he doesn't beat about the bush either. He's been on his path for, you know, donkey's years. He's in his 80s now, and
Uh,
he's still teaching. He travels the world, so it it was like a massive download, this info dump
uh,
that went into me. I heard it. I didn't understand most of it at the time, but I knew that it was like a coffee percolating. I thought, okay, this is what I have to do. I have to let it percolate. I I'll understand what I know, what I can in the moment. The rest is going to percolate, and it will return, and it will, you know, there'll be another opportunity for it to become embodied, because that's what I really feel about qigong. You can do the practice from a technical perspective. You can understand the philosophies from an intellectual perspective, but you can't really understand qigong itself and the totality of that until you've practiced it for a certain amount of time, and it starts to become embodied in your psyche and in your tissues. It literally unfolds its through a series of sort of progressive awarenesses, and that never stops. So
uh,
I met Tevye Fung, who is the founder of White Tiger Qigong, through Mantak Chia, and I've been working with him
uh,
ever since. And he says the same. You know, he's been a Qigong practitioner since he was 8,
oh,
and but every day that he meets himself for his practice, he goes off and practices. You know, he'll have a new experience, and sometimes you can, you know, a revelation, and sometimes a different response in the body hours or days after you've done a particular practice. So it's because you're rewiring your energy pathways, you're rewiring your nervous system, you're rewiring the whole navigation unit, you're opening up, you're facilitating the flow of chi or energy
uh-huh.
through your fascia, your connective tissue, that where the meridian channels, the channels of energy that connect to your organs, where they lie. So um, when all that becomes more open, there's just more to observe, and more sensitivity. And at the same time, sometimes I feel like more, as you know, you're just more at the beginning of things, because there's just so much to try and fathom in this world, right?
Yeah, no shortage of that. Uh,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. What led you to commit to White Tiger Qigong? Why that?
I saw Tevye from a distance at the
Uh-huh.
Tao Garden. He was teaching a course. So he used to rent a space there. Well, it's big enough, you know, to have several things going on. And I saw him walking, and I just thought, what kind of juice is that guy on? It was, you can tell by the way he's, well, look, I'm a Qigong man. He was so contained and energized and connected and present. And I was quite fascinated. So I had a chance to speak to him briefly, and then I found out a little bit about his Qigong. And what I'd been practicing with Master Chia was predominantly Naidan, or internal practices, internal alchemy. There was some moving practices, and I started learning Tai Chi with him as well. But I was curious about what Tevye was teaching, so I found out about his style and his approach, and he teaches a lot of dynamic Qigong. That is, at first glance, it's more yang in its appearance. So 5 animal Qigong, for instance, or the 5 animal frolics, the Wuxin Qi practice that mimics the action of animals in the wild. There's like 20 of those forms. 8 trigram Qigong, which is the foundation for Bagua or Baguazhang, walking. It's a kind of walking Qigong, but it's spiraling and spinning the body in beautiful twists and curves and turns. It's very elegant. And the 5 element Qigong, which is a really powerful, it's more staccato. It's a Qigong that takes you into a peak movement that you hold. And as you're holding, you're wringing out your internal organs. And then as you release, you get this powerful shift in your organs. As the Qi comes in and the blood flows and the oxygen saturates, and you get rid of any stagnation from those organs as well. So when I got the chance to see some of this in action, I thought that's what I'm going to study next. So the following year, I went to study with him, and the rest is history, because I just fell in love with it. I loved his teaching approach. He teaches with a layer of modern scientific understanding of what's going on in the body, which I think is kind of important for teaching in the Western world. And it actually, I loved that so much that it inspired me to go and do a master's degree. So I was thinking, do I study Chinese medicine? Do I study sport and exercise science? So I actually did sport and exercise science, and it gave me an additional foundation for my understanding of the practice, and then my ability to teach it.
I love that. And that's the end of part 1 of our conversation with Sarah Devine. Join us next week for part 2.
James Ferrigno here, and it would be great if you guys could subscribe, like, follow whatever platform you're seeing this on, because that really helps me be able to continue the podcast. And so if you can do that, that would really help us out. Thanks a lot.